let's start with Griff.
Well, I am road tripping. I'm still in Northern California in the Redwoods, basically. So it's really nice. I'm going to. There's like construction, so we're gonna hang here for most of the day and then drive like all day Saturday, basically.
Where to?
Seattle. Well,
Seattle.
To Olympia first. My dad lives in Olympia, and so we're gonna stop by and say hi, and probably
So you're going through Oregon, and then all the way up to Washington.
Yeah, like tonight we'll find a random spot, wherever we get tired, and there's a city that mix. We'll just stop and grab a hotel, and then keep driving tomorrow. And then Sunday, I'll be hanging out with horses. My dad inherited like a nice little horse ranch with 2 horses and fruit trees, and I'll probably sleep in a shift pod just to see if my Burning Man. I'll check out all my Burning Man gear and see, because Burning Man is probably going to happen this year. So
is there any date set or
for the burn? Yeah, it's the last week of August.
Okay. Good. All right, good plans.
Yeah.
What are you passing to?
I'll pass it to Sean.
Hey everyone, hope everyone's doing well. None of my plans are as good as your guys's, but tons of tomatoes are coming in the backyard, so we'll be picking up a bunch of fruit, and some of our trees are coming along. We got blueberries coming in, eggplants are starting to come in, so we'll spend our time out in the backyard making sure everything is nice and fertilized for spring and summer. And otherwise, that's it. Passing over to you, Livy.
What I'm doing for the weekend. I'm so tired of the lockdown here. It's really like, what else can I do at home? Like creating things to distract myself. But I started to learn the guitar, so maybe I'll be practicing a little bit. And I pass to Ivy.
Thanks, Livia. On Sunday, I'm planning to go spear fishing with my neighbor and someone we met here. It's my first time to try spear fishing without any tank, just the mask and the fins. So hopefully I can catch some fish, so we have something to eat to lunch. Eat for lunch. Yeah. So and I pass it to decentralized SDGs.
Thank you. Sorry, I came a little late, so you have to remind me what the question was.
Sure. It's just, what are the plans for the weekend?
Well, I had read this article in the New York Times about like the YOLO culture, like sort of how in the Black Plague, after there was like a mass death, like people started questioning religion. So not as dramatic, obviously, but as people are coming as lockdowns are easing, or where people are just becoming fatigued with it, there's like a YOLO culture building up. So this might cause like a lot of disruptions in society. Some of them super beneficial if channeled the right way. So I was trying to think about this, and Eleanor Roosevelt said you should do something that terrifies you every day. So there's this one lake that I like. It's probably a little too cold, and I was gonna go maybe skinny dipping in it if no one's there. That's my one like very small thing, but everything else is quite mundane. But I'm trying to build on my YOLO culture. That's just more or less the general plan.
And who are you passing to?
Did Griff go?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know who.
Juan Carlos can go.
Yeah. Sorry, I came late. So
no problem.
Over to you.
Thank you. Nothing. It's like my quarantine weekend routine. I'm going to my parents' house, and I will spend some days there. I like to spend time with them, but also like during the weekend, during the weeks, like to be in my place. So it's nice. And yeah, I think that's it. Santi, did you say what you were going to do?
No, I haven't yet. Thank you, Juan Carlos. Well, I have two good news. One is St. George Day. I was telling Grief, and so I may, after the meeting, I may just get out and just walk around the street and get some books. And I also went to have a regular doctor visit this week, and my cholesterol is going down. That means I'm going to be a little wild eating this weekend and forget about the fucking diet. So I hope I can have a couple of good meals during the weekend before I come back to check a little bit what I have to put on my stomach. All right, Chuy, you're just getting the question here is what are the plans for the weekend?
Hey Santi, hi everyone. For this weekend, I don't have any plans actually. I just wanted to. It's probably the last weekend that I'm gonna spend in my hometown before moving to Mexico City. So probably just catch up with friends and hang out, something like that. Get to enjoy it because hopefully I'm not gonna be back in a while.
All right, thank you all. Okay, can anyone share the document for the terms so we can just go over it and really did you have a chance? Oh, first of all, I'm happy to see your face looks much better. Well, I didn't get to see it yesterday, but from your words, I figured out that you were knocked out from the COVID shot. So I'm happy to see you're looking good and feeling better. Did you have a chance to go over the document during the week?
I did. I made some changes. I'll have to go into the document to see exactly what because it doesn't.
Okay.
I don't
Can
recall,
can
but
anyone, Griff? Can you share your screen with the document?
Man, I would love to pass that responsibility to someone else.
Okay.
I
It's
can
on the
share it,
agenda.
but where is it?
It's on the agenda. It's updated, and there's the links are there. So it's the terms, the proposal terms document.
The
I am.
agenda is. Oh, you have it, Juan?
Yes, I will do it.
Thank you, Juan Carlos.
thanks, Juan. Yeah, I got the COVID shot yesterday, and it knocked me out in the morning. Or I got it 2 days ago, it knocked me out the next morning. But once my migraine passed, it was pretty easy. Juan Carlos, if you could scroll down a little bit. Juan, you're muted.
Where do you want me to stop?
I just scroll down a little bit, and I'll let you know.
It's still loading for me. Can anyone else see it?
No, I don't see it either.
You can see the first page of the document.
Let me try if I can share my screen.
So weird, because I am scrolling and I am in page 29.
Sorry, Juan. Yeah, for me, I just see the first page.
Maybe try reloading it, Juan.
Yes, I will do that.
Okay, send to is working.
Mine's still loading. All right, there we go. I see it and I see scrolling, so we're winning. So last week we went over some of the proposal issues. I know we're still kind of tentative on whether or not we'll be staking wrapped XDAI or staking TEC, and if people want to make a dispute under Celeste, whether or not they'll be doing it in TEC or wrapped XDAI. And so that stuff is still highlighted. If we scroll down a little bit more, I went ahead and talked a little more here about off-chain enforcement and the use of the Discord, forum, GitHub communities, as well as using Gravity. In terms of the third bullet point there, I'll probably need to highlight it and add a few more things that are consistent with what we've talked about, some proposals that we think would be inconsistent with community values. But this section is starting to get pretty filled out. And so for this next week, the plan for me anyways, subject to being told something different, is really working on both the proposal recipient as well as the distribution of the funds and how exactly that'll happen on chain. But relatively, I don't think it's going to be a huge problem. It should be pretty smooth. It's been very helpful looking at OneHive because a lot of this stuff is discussed there. I know they're changing a little bit, but it's been very helpful. If we can scroll down a little bit more, we still have to talk about fees for making proposals, which we think there's probably going to be a fee for making a proposal. And I may want to discuss in that section what happens when someone makes a dispute and whether under Celeste, the funds staked end up going to the person that wins that dispute. Here, this is probably where we actually, this section here is probably where we get into some of the what the TEC is not. And I've kept working on this. It's one of the first things I drafted, but I have gone back and unfortunately keep adding things. But part of the issue here is there are so many laws and regulations about various types of platforms, right? Like if you're a charity, there are certain rules you have to follow. If you're a financial institution, there's so many rules. If you're holding people's credit card information, there's so many rules. And TEC really does none of those things, which is good. But I think at first glance, especially when people are relatively new to, I don't want to call it decentralized finance because it's not, but in that same kind of mold, I think you kind of look at it and it looks like a lot of these things. A TEC that is distributing grants kind of looks like a charity. A project that holds money and distributes it based on what the community wants, like a third-party broker. It has funds being distributed, kind of looks like you're either a payment processor or a payment gateway, which all have tons of rules behind them. And so this section here is just about laying out that TEC is really none of those things. No one is making purchases with their credit cards on the TEC website. It just, that stuff isn't happening. Obviously, if TEC either ends up or decides in the future to have, a decentralized exchange, maybe that gets more complicated. But even then, you tend to come in and you're not purchasing anything really with credit cards or debit cards or any kind of um, traditional financial tool that has a lot of rules behind it. So probably still then wouldn't be that big of a deal. But kind of still going through here. The next section is no solicitation. Basically that, the TEC is not out there arguing for anything, partly because it's just a DAO, right? I mean, it's just a collection of the community. And while any member of the community may be making proposals, nothing is kind of done on behalf of the TEC unless the community votes on it. The DAO via the community is the entity that manages funds through votes. Again, it's just, look, the DAO makes these decisions through community decisions and then distributes funds on chain. It's just kind of reasserting to people that this isn't someone, you're not making a grant request to Bill Gates and saying, hey, Bill Gates, I have this really cool idea on how to distribute malaria vaccines. Give me some money so I can put it into practice. No, that's not what TEC does. Even though what TEC does may look kind of similar to that, like there could be a project that does that, but the community is going to say yes or no, not an individual centralized authority is going to do that. Taxes, we've talked about this before. There's just basically no tax advice, and everyone's going to have to kind of look to see in their own jurisdiction whether or not there are tax implications for what they're doing. I may want to put out there that even people that contribute to the community or that hold the token, you're going to have to look to see if there's any tax consequences of that, because I highly doubt it could be considered a donation or a charity donation. But I don't want to give the impression that it is. So probably need to tell them, hey, you're going to have to look at the rules in your own jurisdiction. The modification, we've talked about this. And then data retention, I need to add to that section that obviously the elements of the community that are done on third-party sites like Discord, GitHub, Gitbook, the forum, all those things could, in theory, have data retention policies that differ from what TEC does, but we don't control that. Prohibited conduct, we discussed this last week. I added 2, just talking about having to look at their individual jurisdictions on whether or not what they're doing is prohibited. I always have in mind the Ethereum guy that is in trouble for whatever speech he gave, where he was, or at least as far as the government is concerned, was basically suggesting he could skirt, or people could skirt sanctions on North Korea through Ethereum. And that's a really, really bad idea if that is as alleged. If we go down a little bit more in disputes, clearly I have a couple more sections here, and then release warranties, those will be gotten to. Disputes, this is a big thanks to Juan Carlos for really making this stuff clear. But here we're talking about gravity and escalating through ultimately Celeste. And that, gravity is obviously kind of an off-chain situation, whereas Celeste is an on-chain dispute resolution. I included, I think, all the necessary links, either because Juan Carlos included them elsewhere or because I went and found them where they currently are in the Git book. Although looking at the writing, this is pretty clear. This is Juan Carlos's writing because this is a really good description of gravity. And scroll down a little bit further, payment processor. This is one of the things I was talking about before. So this is not our stuff yet. This is now in the GoFundMe stuff, but this is them talking about a lot of the same stuff. And pointing out that they're not a payment processor, and that they're not holding funds. They're a payment gateway because they do take credit cards. So that gives them some responsibility, but they're not a payment processor. So they're not actually settling any credit card transactions with any banks, which makes them a processor if they do that. A payment gateway is just having credit card information. TEC is going to do neither. So our section on that's going to be pretty much for neither of those things. But again, it's just one of those things where like it's ridiculous to say all the things you're not in an attempt to describe what you are. But it's probably best to kind of, as much as possible, say we're not these traditional things that have all these rules about them. It's something completely different. So that's where we are. This next week, is probably going to be on the recipient and the distribution of funds on chain after a proposal passes. And then after those sections, which I think are the big ones, the last couple of things to fill out are actually pretty straightforward and shouldn't take very long. So we're getting close to kind of the end of the document. So if there's things we need to add or things that need to be expanded on further, I am all ears.
Thank you, Sean. I was thinking when you were mentioning that we are not a payment processor, actually through the fees, if we have a fee for proposal, issuing, how would you consider that?
So I don't think that would count as a payment processor. And the reason why is, at least under the rules that I'm familiar with, that's about taking credit card information or debit card information. It's not about taking any money at all. So it's in the event that the TEC token has value, I don't think it falls under either a payment gateway or processor. It's not a gateway because we're not taking credit card information or debit card information, nor is it a processor because we're not going to a bank and settling the transaction. So we're not a third party kind of behind the scenes of a website. I don't know what you use for any of your websites, Santi, but Squarespace is a real popular one in the US.
Yeah.
They're a payment processor because they'll actually settle some of the credit card transactions. If you have an online shop, they'll go and make sure those transactions actually settle, which takes a surprisingly long time. Like we get charged like within a day. And we see it on our credit cards, but that money actually doesn't change hands for like 30 days. It takes a long time. Checks take a long time. It takes like 2 weeks to, fully actually fund and clear. But TEC doesn't, none of that. I'm unaware of anyone saying a coin being transacted, even a stable coin, makes you a payment gateway or processor because it's not credit card or debit card information. And currently, I think that's what that stuff covers. We may find out this year or 5 years down the line that they're going to count stable coins as that stuff. I don't think so. But yeah, I mean, that kind of regulatory uncertainty certainly exists. But I don't, to the best of my knowledge, I don't even think we're in gray areas. I think this one's pretty clear that we're not.
Okay, great. Any other questions here? No.
No, great work, man. It looks like a lot of really important bases were covered.
Yeah, I hope so. It's we talked about this before, Griff. There's just so much confusion on what is allowed, and I think it's really bad when the only way to get regulatory advice is through like regulatory action, where it'd be so much nicer if we were just getting even just speeches saying, hey, this is stuff we think is okay. There's an SEC commissioner in the US that has proposed some safe harbors for a lot of token projects that there's hope is going to get acted on in the next couple of years. And that would be awesome because at least the way it's been described, it would provide, short of like flagrantly violating the law, you would be in a safe harbor as far as the law is concerned. for a lot of projects. And that'd be really neat. But she's generally considered really pro crypto, and the current SEC commissioner that just got approved is seen as favorable. Like, he taught courses on crypto at MIT. And so there's clearly people in the room now that understand it, you know, as well as we want to. I don't know. There's so many different, like, at least in the US, so many different areas of government that are involved, because we just saw Treasury say, oh, we're probably going to tax, you know, unrealized gains. And everyone in crypto lost it, because imagine having to pay taxes on unrealized, not even after you sell, just because you have them. That'd be like your house went up in value and you're paying capital gains because your house went up in value. And so people lost it the last couple of days over those comments. And so, you know, you have one department say that, and then another department say, hey, you can't ban Bitcoin. Like, someone asked one of the SEC commissioners, well, you know, does the government plan to even consider banning crypto? And the response was, how do you ban something peer-to-peer? Which was such like a smart answer, and one we don't usually hear. So I wish we had so much more clear guidance on what to do. We just don't. And so we just do the best we can, and hopefully, you know, everyone appreciates that. Someone just got in trouble. Some library DAO, what was it called? They just got in trouble, and their response was so beautiful, because they basically said for like 3 years they've been talking to the SEC and trying to get guidance, like begging for guidance, and basically got told nothing. And the only response from the SEC was, we'll tell you when you break the law, but we won't tell you if you might be breaking the law. And that's not helpful, because you need that guidance before you launch a project, not after you launch. Because most people, if they got told you can't do X, Y, or Z, would probably follow the rules, as long as they're moderately fair. And when you don't get that, you're just left to just do the best you can.
So is there any resolution for the library process? No,
I think they just got, I think the lawsuit was filed, or the SEC has at least said they're going to file a lawsuit against them. They may not have filed it yet. And Library just put out a PR response that was really, really well written. Like, probably not by a lawyer, because it just sounded too honest. Like, it wasn't hedging bets. It wasn't like, oh, we're disappointed in this, but we look forward to our day in court. This was more like, for 3 years we've been trying to get an answer from the government and we can't, and that's ridiculous. And now they're telling us we're in trouble. And how does that feel fair or just? And so it stinks. It really does. I wish there were, you know, better ways to say, well, here's how to stay out of trouble, or here's how to, you know, stay on the good side of the government. And you just, in this area, you don't have it.
They just go the easy way. Do whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you what you have to do, and then later on, I will just charge you for whatever you want.
Yeah,
That's it.
I mean, it's almost like they wait for a project to do well, and then,
right,
you know, then they go after them. And so they just, you know, another law that just got passed in the U.S. Well, yes, exactly, Griff, was extending so disgorgement is a fancy word. It's a 10-cent word, for the SEC able to pull money back from ill-gotten gains, right? So if you're a part of a project, it doesn't matter if it's crypto or not, stocks, whatever, and it's illegal, the SEC used to be able to go back 3 years or 4 years and get any of the profit you made from this project that's ultimately deemed illegal. And the government just extended it to 10 years. So, you know, they're giving themselves a ton of time to build a case. And at the same time, not giving anyone in the community a chance to figure out what's legal or not.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. What I think about this is a bit like there's in uncertainty. There's always uncertainty in law, and you'll have risks then. And obviously, if you're looking like what you're doing is closer to to fraud or a Ponzi scheme. I mean, I think the world is watching what's happening with Dogecoin, and when that collapses, I think there's going to be massive people holding the bag, questions asked, and regulations. So, if you're going more towards socially beneficial and closer to what is already existing regulatory principles, at least if it doesn't have to be just so much the processes, but I think the principles, you're probably on the safer, less risky side than if you're looking like you're just doing regulatory arbitrage and things that are clearly been through the official channels been prohibited, and actually just engaging it and calling it something else. So that's probably where the scrutiny will focus, because they have limited resources, and that would be the ones that would make the most sense, because they're the least socially beneficial and most obvious targets for all these weaknesses in the regulation, like consumer protection, all those aspects that I think they're trying to build on. So
I think that's a great
general thought.
No, I think that's a great point. And here's my yes, but. My yes, but is it is harder to go against projects that have raised $1 billion, because then there's a lot of money on the other side to fight those cases. And so sometimes the most egregious violators are the ones that end up skating, because it becomes much too hard of a case to take on if you take on a project through, let's say, a blatantly improper ICO.
Ripple.
That raises,
EOS.
So look at those projects and look how long. Now the SEC decided to sue Ripple, and we'll see what happens there. But that case is going to take years, and that's because they have billions of dollars to fight on the other side.
Or they'll just settle.
Or they'll settle.
A slap on the wrist, like
for
EOS.
a slap on the wrist, for like EOS. Or you end up like Ethereum and just basically told, well, we think you were a security when you were issued, but now you're sufficiently decentralized that we're not going to pursue anything. And I cannot believe that that's done for any other reason other than, do you want to go up against the Ethereum Foundation that has so much money that if you lose, you're going to set a precedent you don't want to have happen. So you might aim for smaller projects that are still going to be newsworthy, but you're probably going to win because you can just muscle them around. And I think you're right that I think a project that's focused on social goods is not a great target. Like the optics of it are not as great, right? But at the same time, when you don't have billions of dollars, you do just look easier to target. Because why would you want to fight a Ripple? That's going to take 5 years before they get a decision, if there even is one. There's probably a settlement for a decent amount of money. But if you want a decision in your favor, you're going to go after someone that can't afford to fight. And then they'll plead, guilty to whatever, criminal sanction there is. And you get your precedent. So that's not a good way to do things, in my opinion. It'd be better if the government told us up front, hey, here's a safe harbor. If you're in this area, we think you're safe. And if you go too far, then you're probably, in trouble. And then at least give people, there's still going to be fights at the edges, at the margins. But when there's so much gray area, it doesn't help anyone. And so, yeah, and the law is all about finding that one case that is a little different and pushing that boundary just a little bit. But this area, it's like the whole area is just almost completely in dark, and it's hard.
I think what's happening in Europe, though, if you look at these this MiCA proposal for this regulation in crypto assets, it's being considered by the council, but my understanding is that's moving a bit forward. And I think that also, because they are looking to create a framework, right? They want the good stuff to grow and they don't want to kill it off. I mean, it's like how the early internet was wild and then light touch regulation to, allow proper things to flourish. So I think we're kind of entering in that stage, and good regulation I'm curious to see what jurisdiction comes out first. I think there's also a race to get frameworks in place, because then you'll be the attractive jurisdiction for a lot of these things. So But I thought that MiCA regulation was a nice balance in looking at the consumer protection aspects that they want to promote, making sure you're getting at least some due diligence, and then yet putting it within already existing framework with a bit of a light touch as an initial step, but it's not passed yet.
Yeah, that's probably one of the issues. It's an initial step because innovation is going so fast. They probably cannot keep up the page, and they probably don't want to because they rather let the industry move forward and then they jump in whenever they feel comfortable. They can jump in. That's my personal sense. That's the way they are approaching this.
I mean, I think if you were to ask people in the SEC, investigators, attorneys, you know, is Bitcoin a private thing? I don't know how sophisticated of an answer you get from anyone. And that's dangerous when the people that are enforcing the rules don't entirely understand the thing they are trying to regulate. And so I hope you're right. If I'm optimistic, I say yes. They're going to want the good things to flourish and they'll try to go after the bad things. And that would be awesome. And I would love that. I'm so worried that they don't understand the tech behind it, that their default's going to view everything as a attempted fraud of consumers. Like they're just going to see everything that way, whether the project looks like it's trying to be helpful and do good, or a project's just trying to blatantly raise money for a rug pull, and they're not going to tell the difference between those two things because in their mind, it took money from consumers and that's all they're going to care about. Like that's where their focus is. And what the project says it was trying to do that's the negative side of my view of it. My positive side is you're right. They're going to look at good projects and embrace them and encourage them and point to them and say, look, this is the way we would want our project to work. This is how a governance token works. This is how a utility token works. This is how a security token works. And that would be awesome. But literally, it was just this week that I heard someone in the government say, how do you ban something peer-to-peer? And this thing is like 10 years old, 12 years old. And that's the first time I've heard the government accurately describe Bitcoin. Otherwise, it's always like, it's just some internet money, blah, blah, blah. So if it's taking them 12 years to get the basics of that, it keeps me up at night. Anyway,
All
that's
right,
my
great
greed on government
here.
for the week.
Great discussions here. Anyone else wants to point out anything else here?
I want to apologize for the jump on my internet when I was sharing screen, but I'm glad that you're going great. And I want to tell Sean that if that takes 10 years in the USA, that takes then like 15 years or 20 years to in Latin America. And
I'll keep that in mind.
And here people is like our government is so corrupt that I am also I am sometimes a little bit afraid of like a type of enforcement through force, but I am always crossing my fingers that doesn't happen.
The upside of the long time it's going to take the regulatory bodies, both in the US, Europe, South America, Africa, Asia, everywhere, is, and normally I don't care for this stuff, but the people that work in government regulating it will then leave those positions to go work in the industry. And the only upside of that is that hopefully they get educated on how these projects actually work. And you get arguably, at least for the time being, the best of both worlds. You're going to get people that understand both how regulations around securities or consumer protection or whatever area of law it is, and how that intersects with crypto, right? And when people understand both, they'll be able, hopefully, to guide the industry in some ways and in some respects. They're not always the most ideal allies, but they're necessary allies. And so I don't usually love seeing this kind of revolving door between like, you know, someone's going to leave the government and go work for, you know, the Ethereum Foundation. But the only upside of that is that hopefully it starts getting everyone closer on the same page in terms of best practices, because that's the only way it's going to happen. Because otherwise, we're just shouting across the room at each other, and you have the regulatory people going, "This is all about consumer fraud and protecting, you know, retail investors," and the people on the other side, all the crypto people, are going to be like, "This is about changing the world and incremental change, and none of these rules apply to us." And they just go back and forth and back, and they just scream past each other. And so hopefully the people that leave government positions and start go working for crypto companies, they'll start bridging that gap. And hopefully then we'll get some better, you know, outcomes where we get clarity. That's all we need is clarity.
I think that can be like a long-term goal of this legal working group, because like the TC as a Schelling point, if we make like standards, legal standards, then we are going to like broadcast that to the whole community, and like uh, like make settlements, and like if we want to educate that and make that like advice process on how we see legal things, I think that can be like a long-term goal for this group, like to make statements or like documents, legal documents advising governments, or advising like educating um, for the best implementation and adaptation and social adaptation of all these changes and technology.
I mean, on that, I sit sometimes in these. There's some just interesting research being done by the Law Society of England and Wales that's actually driving a lot of the thinking around making even legal analogies to what is a key and where does the key sit, versus like questions on if you have a car key and you have a million copies of your car key, like influence or outsized influence out of those research papers.
Yeah, I mean, I think countries are starting to see, and there's a back and forth. You can almost see it where half of the government may be concerned that, look, we don't understand this technology, we don't know exactly what it will do, it seems like it might threaten our currency, that's bad. And you have that, and then you have this other half of that same government that seems to be saying, if we're not leaders in this area, someone else will be, and we're going to be the ones, kind of funny to say this, holding the bag at the end of the day if we don't adopt some of these things, whether it's, you know, all these countries talking about digitizing their currency is at least a first step, right? Now we can imagine all the problems if a centralized government decides to digitize their currency, but yeah, I think you're right. I mean, these debates are happening, and it's going to take a long time. And in the meantime, people are going to have to go out there and create, and that's going to be the role of people that create to kind of move this space forward. So hopefully that's what happens.
Do you think it's possible? I don't know how to craft this question, but that DAOs could somehow ask for that the members of a DAO could ask for independence, kind of like a state asks for independence of their country, If
Depends on what it's asking for independence from. You know,
like for the city, like let's say you can be a citizen of a DAO, and since you have a currency, statutes that you're following, like a guide of principles and a way of organizing, if you could, like, I don't know, at some point in the future, like issue a passport, let's say, from this DAO nation, and be independent from the places where you're attached to, like as a nation state kind of thing.
Maybe. Probably the answer is, as long as what you're doing in the DAO doesn't run afoul of someone else, like that country's laws, right? They'll probably be fine with it. But when you start talking about, we think that means, because we're members of this DAO, we think we don't owe taxes in the places we live because we're members of a DAO, not the place we live, there you're going to get pushback. Like, there's just no way a government's going to say, oh yeah, that's fine, you can get out of all these obligations. Or a country that has military service as a requirement, and you say, well, I don't have to serve in the military even though I live in this country with mandatory military service because I'm actually a member of a DAO, and our DAO actually is a non-opposition to violence DAO. I don't think that's going to fly, or at least it's not likely to fly. Some other, I mean, that was a really good question, by the way. Some areas, I think the government will be fine with DAOs operating, but they'll never be comfortable with DAOs skirting the laws that apply where the members of the DAO live.
And that's where the DAO needs somehow to do that. The DAO needs to take ownership of some piece of land, and then get out, right?
And conceivably, a country could do that, right? I mean, you could have a country that's in need of revenue that says, hey, look, we're willing to let a DAO operate here in New South Wales, right? In exchange for the DAO getting taxed. Like, the government has to get something out of it. So you're either buying the land, or you're leasing it from the government, or you're paying a tax every year, or whatever the case is. I could imagine that happening. And then there is some possibility of what Libby's describing happening in that situation. I can't imagine they would say you can do whatever you want to do with no I imagine there would still be probably a series of, hey, we wouldn't feel really comfortable if you did X, Y, Z. Whether that's, I don't think they would allow like manhunting. We're going to sell you this land in New South Wales. You can have a DAO. If you buy the land, we'll let you operate. And you can have some kind of, Mortal Kombat area. That's not going to fly. So there'll probably still be some rules, but maybe not as many as that currently operate now.
I think it's a matter of time, because I recall when I was younger, it was mandatory military service here in Spain, and some people started opposing, and they would be prosecuted, and then more people started opposing, and more people started opposing, and then they decided to, those that didn't want to go through military service, they could do social service, a longer period, but they could do social service. And then more people was opposing, and they finally got rid of it, and now it's professional. There's a few guys that want to go there, they get paid, and the rest of the people doesn't have to go through it. When society opposition is big enough, things change. And I think that we are just witnessing the start of this whole change that's going to start pushing forward big social changes, because this is unstoppable. It's much, 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 much better than what we have today in many senses.
Yeah, I agree. And certainly it's a question of both time frame and what's being changed, right? Challenging one policy as a government has is one thing, and challenging the right of the state to exist itself is quite another. Like that's a much bigger deal. And because that's a much bigger deal, you're going to get much bigger pushback. But if you challenge one policy, yeah, I mean, the amount of support you need behind that is much, it's almost like conviction voting, right? It's if the issue itself is not hugely important, you hit 20% support, you're probably got, way more than you need to get what you want done. But the bigger thing you're trying to change, if you're saying, hey, look, I imagine a world where there is no government at all, you're going to get much more pushback from the government. And it could happen. I mean, why not? But it's probably not going to happen in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. I mean, that's a much more.
I was thinking also, I mean, government is effectively an analog DAO, especially in democracies. You have a treasury and you have a mechanism upon which decisions are made just through representation. And this is opening up possibilities to improve upon that in a digital format. But I think on the aspect, and you see what's happening in Wyoming, I mean, they're going to be integrating it to give it that legal structure so that it can benefit from all of the already existing infrastructure that exists and the protections that come with that. But on Olivia's point, I was thinking about, I read this paper once, it's on the digital kibbutzim, and so there, I mean, the kibbutz in Israel, they're quite autonomous, so they have already a certain legal, autonomy in the law. So right, this is still within the system, but they're given quite an amount of freedom. And it was thinking around what a DAO like ecosystem inside this already autonomous. So I think when you're looking at already where are more autonomous zones that then might incorporate this as a structure, like sort of a future-oriented structure upon which they could then improve what they're already building on. So that's something I thought was kind of interesting. And they had proposed a whole model.
I think that's a great point. And I think Griff's actually said this before, though I don't know if he said it about the DAO specifically, but it's less of a revolution and more of an evolution, because there are so many analogs to what I think DAOs are, where you have some amount of autonomy to kind of act. And a kibbutz is a great example. And I think you can imagine quite a few where like, you have a lot of autonomy to act in these small groups. And what a DAO does is just makes that possibility expand so much further, right? I mean, how many different countries are on this call right now, talking about that? That just isn't usually the way it works. Whereas a co-op, right, is kind of like a DAO in America, where like they may own a supermarket, and as long as you put in X number of hours at the supermarket, you're allowed to buy produce at a lower price, right? And so they're not breaking any of the state's rules. They're acting within sort of just a set of rules they themselves have agreed to adhere to, but they're doing something much different than what people do on a day-to-day basis. There's co-op housing. I live by UCLA. There's co-op housing. So in exchange for cheaper housing, you put in X number of hours of work at the co-op. And so now you have skin in the game for the area you live in and you're taken care of. And conversely, you get a deal on how much you pay in rent, because now the school doesn't have to pay for janitorial services or landscaping or whatever the case is. So yeah, there's a lot of examples of things that look DAO-ish. And when these things start getting litigated more seriously, the most successful DAOs are going to be the one that can articulate to regulators, hopefully not courts, but just to regulators, that what they're doing doesn't look as strange or as odd or as foreign as maybe at first glance it does. Because that's what I think worries states and regulators, is when they don't understand what's happening. Because their first initial reaction is always that it must be problematic. It must be bad. And the communicators, the ones that communicate that in any functioning DAO is actually pretty similar to how a lot of stuff works. Hopefully they're the ones, like you mentioned earlier, they're the ones that governments will look at and go, no, they're trying their best to do it right. Maybe they need to change a couple of things, but we're not going to, throw them all away and throw away the key. So.
Hey, Juan Carlos, you wanted to mention something?
That I think that a good thing about DAOs is that their members are dispersed, and I am not so prone to like having like a land ruled by a DAO, because I feel like that maybe like would make easier to make an enemy image of a DAO, like pointing at us, and like looking at us maybe as yeah as an enemy. And it would be like easier if someone want to make an attack or something, like, but I think that what makes this evolution inevitable is that it's coming from everywhere in the world, and it's not like, because maybe we can create a small paradise, like having a land within a DAO, but that would be also like excludent to the reality of the world. And I think that what is really great from the DAO ecosystem is like, it's not just some idea coming from some countries, but it's like something that is coming from the roots of the whole world. And that's what makes it more difficult if someone would want to attack us, because
it's like a guerrilla fight.
yeah,
that's a good point, Juan Carlos. So, like, it puts a target on your back in a way. You know, but I think that's one of the neat things about DAOs is like, there's probably a DAO that fits everyone, right? Like, there's going to be some people who are like, I would love to live in a DAO community that, you know, there's a book, I gotta find the title. This city in New Hampshire had a bunch of libertarians move there, and they basically got rid of like every government service. I mean, just everything. They got rid of the trash company, they got rid of everything, just zoning laws, everything. And people were just allowed to basically almost do just about what they wanted. And the town went to hell. Like it went bad. It just didn't work that well. But those things can happen. But there's probably a group of people who would love that idea. Like, let's try it again. You know, the first time it didn't work. Okay, we'll try again. And then some people like you, Juan Carlos, that don't want to move to an area and have a target on your back and live amongst that. And you like the idea of the DAO the way it exists in this group. And I think there'll be room for both those things to exist, right? I mean, one DAO doesn't have to exclude the other just because they both have kind of different views of what it means to have a functioning DAO. So they can both happen. Why not?
All right, guys, we're on top of the hour. Thank you all for joining. It was a great discussion, and I hope to see you again next week.
Bye, everyone. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye.